Billionaire Erotica, written and produced by Billionaire Crib and narrated by Helen Voss. Prologue. I never wanted this life. I never wanted him. But when I walked into Damien Cross's office, I knew nothing would ever be the same. He's a billionaire, ruthless, dangerous, and impossibly magnetic. The kind of man who can ruin you with a glance or consume you with a whisper. And I, his secretary, am supposed to obey, stay professional. Stay out of trouble. Trouble, however, seems to have other plans. Damien watches me, tests me, teases me in ways I should resist but can't. Every late-night meeting, every touch that lingers too long, every secret look between us drags me deeper into a game I'm not sure I can win. Then my past comes crashing in, Ethan. The man I thought I escaped. The one who knows my darkest secrets. And suddenly, I'm caught between desire, danger, and betrayal. Damien isn't just a boss. He's an obsession. And the more I try to pull away, the tighter he pulls me into his world. A world of power, passion, and peril that I may never escape. I thought I could survive this. I was wrong. Now it's not just my heart at stake, it's my life. Chapter 1. I stepped into the towering glass building and felt a shiver crawl up my spine. The kind of shiver that warned you something was dangerous and irresistible at the same time. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a sound so loud it felt like it could echo through the corridors of power itself. I had been told Damien Cross's firm was a place where only the ambitious survived, but I didn't just survive, I thrived. And yet, as I walked past polished executives who barely looked at me but carried an air of quiet fear, I wondered if I had fully understood what I was walking into. The receptionist greeted me with a tight-lipped smile, clearly warning me with her eyes that Damien Cross wasn't a man to take lightly. I nodded, offered a polite smile, and took the elevator up to the top floor, where my new office awaited. As the doors slid open, I felt the temperature shift subtly. It wasn't colder. It was charged, like the room itself was alive, watching. And then I saw him. Damien Cross stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. The city sprawled like a glittering empire below him. He didn't turn immediately, but when he did, the world seemed to narrow. My chest tightened, my pulse spiked, and I had to consciously force myself to breathe. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that could probably have cost more than my entire apartment. But it wasn't the wealth that made him magnetic. It was the presence. The kind of presence that demanded attention, commanded respect, and somehow made you feel like you were being measured, analyzed, and tested all at once. "Vivienne Blackwood," he said. His voice low, smooth, and dangerous, like a melody that you knew you shouldn't hum along to but couldn't stop yourself from doing. "I've heard interesting things." I swallowed and offered him my most professional smile. "I hope they're good things, Mr. Cross." He stepped closer, and with each movement I felt the air grow heavier, the room smaller. His eyes, gray, sharp, calculating, held mine, and I could feel a tension that was more than just professional. There was something in the way he studied me, the faint tilt of his head, the subtle smirk that suggested he wasn't used to being challenged. Or maybe he was, and he liked it. "Good," he echoed, tilting his head. "Interesting, yes. Confident. Unafraid. That will do for now." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, partly from his gaze and partly from the awareness that this was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, but would not be able to resist. He nodded. "I'll do my best, Mr. Cross." He let the corner of his mouth twitch into a hint of a smile, then gestured toward the office behind him. "Follow me. Let's see if your actions live up to your reputation." As I followed him, I noticed the oddities in the office. Whispers ceased when he entered a room. Men and women who otherwise commanded boardrooms and markets seemed to shrink, careful with their words, careful with their eyes. It wasn't fear exactly, it was respect. Or something darker. I could feel the weight of his influence pressing down on me, thrilling and terrifying all at once. He led me to my desk, a sleek, modern piece that contrasted with the dark, imposing furniture around him. "Your job is simple," he said, standing behind me, his presence brushing the edge of my awareness like a dangerous promise. "Organize, manage, anticipate. Keep me informed, keep me safe from fools, and don't get in the way of my work. Can you do that?" I looked up at him, and for a moment, his piercing gaze made me feel exposed, as if he could see my thoughts before I even spoke them. "Yes," I said, firm and steady, though my stomach was twisting in anticipation and something else. Something like hunger I couldn't name. He nodded once, satisfied, then leaned slightly closer, close enough that I could feel the faint scent of his cologne, a mix of something dark and smoky, almost dangerous. "Good," he murmured, low enough that it brushed against my ear. "I like a woman who can handle herself." The words made something ignite in me, a mixture of desire and apprehension. I forced myself to focus on the stack of papers on my desk, the schedules, the calls I needed to make. And yet, I couldn't ignore the subtle electric tension that lingered between us, as if the room itself had decided to play a game we didn't yet understand. Over the next hour I took in the office, executives moving silently, guards strategically positioned, assistants hovering discreetly. Whispers floated through the air, tales of Damien's ruthless decisions, of rivals crushed beneath his ambition, of women who had come and gone under his intense gaze. And yet, no one here dared breathe openly in his presence without permission. I realized, with a strange thrill, that I was not intimidated by him. I was intrigued. Then came the first small test. A file sat on my desk, unmarked, with a note. "I want this organized. By the time I return, I want clarity. Mistakes are costly." I opened it carefully, noting the meticulous structure, the high stakes, and the subtle threats hidden in the margins. It was a puzzle, and I was determined to solve it. Because failing wasn't an option. Not here, not with him watching. He returned abruptly, and I almost jumped. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching, assessing. Every subtle twitch of his eyes, every shadow of a smirk, made my pulse quicken. "You work fast," he said finally. "But I like precision more than speed. Don't forget that." "Yes, Mr. Cross," I replied, though a part of me wanted to ask how one could possibly be precise with him lingering over your shoulder. His presence was suffocating and thrilling, oppressive yet addictive. As the day wore on, I realized that working for Damien Cross was nothing like any job I'd ever had. There were no mundane tasks, no easy routines. Every action, every glance, every word carried weight. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, a dangerous thought took root. This was not just a job. It was a game of power, obsession, and temptation. And I was already losing. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline and the office lights cast long shadows across the polished floors, I understood one undeniable truth. Damien Cross was a man who could ruin you, or consume you entirely. And somehow, inexplicably, I wanted both. I left my desk that evening with trembling hands, my heart hammering not just from adrenaline but from a curiosity that terrified me. The first day had been a warning and an invitation, all at once. And as I stepped into the elevator, I knew I hadn't just walked into a new job. I had walked into a world that would change me forever. A world ruled by Damien Cross, a man whose obsession was waiting to ensnare me completely. Chapter 2. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Damien Cross had left an impression on me yesterday that I couldn't shake. A magnetic pull I didn't entirely understand. My heels clicked against the marble floor, the sound echoing through the hushed corridors, and I could feel eyes lingering on me, but none as dangerously as his. He appeared almost silently, leaning against the edge of the conference table. His sleeves rolled up just slightly, the hint of dark hair at his wrists peeking out. There was a calm, almost predatory grace in the way he moved, like a panther deciding whether I was prey or partner. I had a fleeting thought that maybe I was both. "Vivienne," he said, his voice low and deliberate, sending a shiver down my spine. "I need you to come with me." I followed him through the maze of offices, past glass walls where employees were pretending to work but clearly listening. He didn't say a word, but the air between us was thick, taut with unspoken rules. I knew this was a test, though I had no idea what the parameters were. He stopped in a private meeting room and gestured for me to sit. His eyes held mine as he leaned against the table, casually confident yet charged with something that made my pulse race. "I want to see how well you perform under pressure," he said. "Think you can handle it?" "I can," I said, forcing calm into my voice, though my stomach fluttered in a way I didn't fully understand. He smirked, stepping closer. "Confidence is attractive, but arrogance is fatal. Let's see which one you are." We spent the morning reviewing reports, contracts, and schedules, but it wasn't the work that made my heart pound. It was him. The way his hand brushed mine as he pointed to a line of text, the lingering glance when our eyes met across the table, the subtle way he leaned just a fraction too close. Every gesture was deliberate, yet I couldn't tell if it was manipulation or genuine intrigue. Perhaps it was both. During lunch, I overheard whispers from other employees as I passed by. Names like Damien Cross were spoken in reverent, fearful tones. Rumors circulated. He was ruthless, a man who crushed rivals without hesitation, who demanded absolute loyalty, and whose lovers often vanished from the social scene as mysteriously as they arrived. My curiosity surged, a mix of caution and thrill. What had I really gotten myself into? By late afternoon, Damien had me working on a complex deal that required my full attention. He hovered nearby, making casual, almost innocuous comments that carried an undercurrent of something more dangerous. "You're sharp," he said, leaning over my shoulder as I scrolled through numbers. "I like that. It's rare and refreshing." I felt heat rise in my chest, not just from his proximity but from the awareness that every word, every glance, was a game, a test I was only beginning to understand. I focused on the work, pretending the tension wasn't gnawing at me, but I knew I was already entangled in something I couldn't control. Phone call interrupted our session. Damien answered with his usual composed authority, and I noticed the subtle deference in the voice on the other line. People obeyed him without hesitation. Power radiated off him like a physical force, and I couldn't help but feel both intimidated and exhilarated. When the call ended, he turned to me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You're handling this well," he said. "Better than I expected. But there's more to this job than numbers and schedules. You need to anticipate, read people, read me." My pulse quickened. "Read you?" I asked, trying to mask the quiver in my voice. "Yes," he said, stepping closer. The space between us was electric, charged with unspoken tension. "Understand how I think, what I want, what I won't tolerate. That's your real test. Can you?" "I'll try," I said, though a part of me already knew that trying wasn't enough. Damien demanded perfection. The afternoon stretched into evening, and I realized I hadn't noticed time passing. We were alone in the office now, the city lights glittering outside the massive windows. His presence was suffocating and exhilarating, a paradox I couldn't untangle. Every small movement, his hand brushing my arm as he handed me a folder, the way his gaze lingered on me when he spoke, made my thoughts scatter in ways I didn't fully understand. "You're learning quickly," he said, his voice low and intimate. "But don't get too comfortable. I can be unpredictable." I swallowed, a mix of fear and desire coiling in my stomach. "I like challenges," I said, though I wondered if I fully understood what I was saying. He smirked, stepping closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Good. I like that too." His eyes held mine for a long suspended moment, and I felt the faint brush of tension. Accidental or deliberate, I couldn't tell. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, but every part of me wanted to lean in closer, to test the boundaries he was silently setting. As I left the office that evening, my mind was spinning. The city outside was alive, but nothing could compete with the storm that Damien Cross had stirred inside me. I walked to the elevator, heels clicking, heart racing, and a dangerous thought surfaced. I was no longer just an observer in this world. I was a participant, and the rules were being written around me, by him. Back in my apartment, I tried to focus on normal tasks, anything to distract myself from the electric tension that had followed me home. But images of his piercing gray eyes, the subtle smirk, the brush of his hand, they refused to leave me. The game had begun and I was caught in it. A thrill unlike anything I had felt before raced through me, tangled with a trace of fear. I knew this was more than a job. It was a battlefield of power, desire, and control, and I was already losing. Over the next few days, the tests became more deliberate. Late-night meetings, confidential briefings, and moments when his hand would hover a fraction too close, lingering on mine longer than necessary, kept me in a constant state of heightened awareness. Every interaction became a chess match. I couldn't tell if he was testing my intelligence, my loyalty, or my self-control, or all three at once. Office gossip reached me through hushed conversations near the coffee machine and whispered remarks from assistants. Damien Cross didn't just control his company. He controlled the perception of it, and anyone who underestimated him vanished quietly from the corporate scene. Lovers, rivals, employees. There was always a story, and now I was becoming a part of it whether I wanted to or not. Late one night, alone in the office, I found myself staring out the window at the glittering city below. Damien appeared behind me, silent as always, and placed a hand lightly on the small of my back. The contact was brief, calculated, but it sent a shiver straight to my core. "You're doing well," he said softly. "Better than I expected." I forced myself to focus on the spreadsheets in front of me, on the mundane tasks of the job, but my fingers trembled slightly under his scrutiny. "Thank you," I murmured, though my voice felt small compared to the electricity in the air. He leaned closer, so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my ear. "Remember, Vivienne, this isn't just about work. This is about understanding me, anticipating me, surviving me." A thrill of fear and desire coursed through me, and I realized that my life had already shifted. Damien Cross was not a man you could ignore. You couldn't outsmart him, charm him, or resist him for long. And somewhere deep down I didn't want to. I was already addicted to the game, and I hadn't even realized the stakes. Chapter 3. I thought I had left my past behind. I thought the life I'd clawed my way out of, the mistakes and the men who had marked me, were safely buried. But the moment Ethan Kane appeared, I realized some shadows never stayed buried. They waited, lurked, and they thrived on showing up when you least expected them. I was walking toward the elevator after a long day of organizing reports and fielding Damien's late-night emails when I heard my name spoken in a tone I hadn't forgotten. Smooth, low, dangerous. My heart froze before it even had time to recognize the sound. "Vivienne." I turned sharply, and there he was, Ethan Kane. My chest tightened and my knees threatened to buckle. The man who had haunted my past, who had been my obsession and my torment in equal measure, was standing there with a smirk that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. His eyes scanned me, slow, calculating, as if measuring how much I had changed, and how much I hadn't. "Ethan," I said carefully, forcing my voice into calm professionalism. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, close enough that the faint scent of his cologne hit me. A mixture of smoke, leather, and danger. Made my pulse stutter. "I could ask you the same thing. You've been busy, haven't you?" His grin widened, the kind that always left a trail of memories I tried desperately to forget. Before I could respond, Damien appeared, sharp as a blade, like he had materialized out of thin air. His presence slammed into the room with the force of a hurricane. "Ethan Kane," Damien said, his voice low, controlled but laced with menace. "I don't think you belong here." Ethan didn't flinch. He simply raised a brow, amused, clearly testing Damien. My stomach twisted in a confusing mix of fear and adrenaline. I wanted to step back, put distance between myself and both men, but the energy in the room pinned me in place. "You have no right," Ethan said, his gaze flicking to me for the briefest moment before returning to Damien. "She's under my protection," Damien cut him off smoothly, his eyes darkening. There was an intensity in his stare, a dangerous edge, that made Ethan pause for a fraction of a second. "And I decide what she is." Understood. Could see it then. Damien wasn't just protective. He was controlling. Obsessed. And the line between care and possession had blurred into something dark, something I wasn't sure I wanted to cross, but couldn't resist either. Ethan chuckled softly, but there was an edge to it, one that spoke of past games and unfinished business. "Always the protector, huh, Damien?" he said. "But how long can that last? You ever wonder what she really wants?" My heart thudded painfully in my chest. What did I want? The thought of Ethan, of what we had once shared, passion, danger, reckless nights, made me ache. But Damien's presence was a slow, simmering burn that terrified me. It was the kind of heat that left your skin tingling long after he was gone. Damien's jaw tightened. "I don't care what she wants. I care what I allow." His words were sharp, final, like a verdict. I wanted to scream at him, push him away, tell him I wasn't his possession, but the moment I opened my mouth, my body betrayed me. The heat of his gaze, the controlled dominance in his stance, made me shiver. There was a thrill in being under his control, a dangerous allure I couldn't deny. Ethan's eyes flicked to me again, slower this time, lingering, teasing, making it clear he remembered every secret, every moment we had shared. "Still caught up in his power, I see," he said softly. "Do you even remember me?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Course I remembered. I remembered too vividly. The nights he had been intoxicating, the ways he had both thrilled and hurt me, the manipulations that had left scars I still carried. "I remember," I said, voice steady, but my chest was tight. "And I'm done with that life." Ethan's smile twisted into something sharper, darker. "Are you?" he whispered. There was a promise in it, or a threat. I couldn't tell. Damien's hand brushed mine. Accidental, deliberate, I couldn't distinguish. Heat flared through me instantly. The touch wasn't gentle. It was claiming, marking. And I realized with a jolt that Damien's obsession with me wasn't just protective. It was possessive, and it thrilled me in ways I had no right to enjoy. "I suggest you leave," Damien said to Ethan. His voice now edged with danger, smooth as a blade. "Now." Ethan didn't move immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been watching," he said, and my blood ran cold. "All of it. I know what he does. I know what he wants. And I know what you want. Deep down, Vivienne." My stomach churned. Watching me. Threatening me. Testing Damien. Every instinct screamed danger. I felt trapped between the two men who had defined my past and were shaping my present. The air was electric, thick with tension, sexual and lethal at the same time. Damien's hand tightened slightly on mine, almost imperceptibly. His eyes locked with Ethan's, silent communication of warning and promise. I realized then that Damien didn't just want to protect me. He wanted to control everything about me. And Ethan wanted to pull me back into a past I had sworn never to revisit. "You're not welcome here," Damien said finally, his tone final, deadly. Ethan raised his hands in mock surrender, still smirking. "Not today," Ethan replied, stepping back, but the look in his eyes promised he wasn't gone. Not really. After he left, the office felt suddenly smaller, tighter, charged in a way that made my pulse hammer. Damien didn't speak at first. He just stood behind me, his presence wrapping around me like a shadow. "Are you okay?" he asked finally, though there was no real question in his tone. It was both concern and command. I'm fine," I said, though my hand shook slightly. He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned closer, close enough that I could feel his breath, his body heat. "He's dangerous," he murmured. "But so are you. And I don't like anyone testing my patience, or my control." I swallowed hard, aware of the fire between us, the tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with desire. His obsession was suffocating, and yet it thrilled me. Part of me wanted to lean into it, to let it consume me entirely. Another part screamed to run, to escape before I lost all control. "You're intense," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He smirked, almost imperceptibly, and the shadow of a grin made his eyes dangerous, magnetic. "I like it when you feel that," he said. "It means you understand the game. And this is only the beginning." I realized then that I wasn't just caught in Damien's world. I was part of it now. The shadows of my past, the danger Ethan represented, the tension, the fear, and the thrill, it was all intertwined. And the line between desire and danger, obsession and care, was blurring in ways I didn't fully understand. I left the office that night with my mind racing, my body still trembling from the encounter, and a dangerous thought simmering in my chest. I had no idea how much control I had left over my life, or my heart, because Damien Cross didn't just want me safe. He wanted me. And Ethan Kane. He hadn't given up either. Chapter 4. The office was nearly empty when I stayed behind to finalize the reports Damien had demanded. The city outside glittered like a million cold, distant stars, but inside, the shadows seemed to stretch longer, curling around the edges of the room as if conspiring with him. I had learned quickly that staying late meant one thing when it came to Damien Cross. A test. Or worse, a temptation I couldn't resist. I hadn't even looked up from the spreadsheets when I felt the shift in the air. The subtle pressure that preceded his presence. The faint, almost imperceptible sound of his steps against the polished floor. Deliberate, silent, predatory. Still here. His voice was behind me, low and intimate, sending a shiver crawling down my spine. "I wanted to finish the work," I said, forcing steadiness into my tone, though my pulse had picked up speed the moment he appeared. He leaned against the edge of my desk, his eyes scanning the numbers on my screen before lifting to mine. The gray of his gaze was sharp, assessing, and entirely too aware of the effect he had on me. "You're thorough," he murmured. "I like that. Most people, they rush, make mistakes, try to impress. You seem to understand the weight of it all." His words were more than praise. They were an observation, a challenge, and a subtle electric caress that left me unerringly aware of the tension between us. I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the work, but every instinct in my body screamed that this was no longer just about spreadsheets. Then he stepped closer and my breath caught. Close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of his body, the faint brush of his suit jacket against mine, and the scent, dark, smoky, intoxicating, that clung to him like a second skin. "You've noticed the rumors, haven't you?" he said suddenly. His voice low, teasing, dangerous. "The whispers about me. About what I do, what I've done." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Yes," I admitted softly. "Everyone talks. I try not to listen." He smiled then, slow, dark, like he'd been expecting that answer all along. "Good. You should listen to me instead. I set the rules here." His eyes held mine, and I felt a thrill that was equal parts fear and desire. And I don't like being ignored. Not by anyone. My chest tightened, the weight of his presence pressing down on me. I wanted to step back to create distance, but I didn't. Something in me, a reckless, dangerous part one hadn't acknowledged, wanted to see just how close he would let me get. You, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. You're intense, controlling. He chuckled softly, a sound that rumbled in my chest. I am, he said, leaning closer, so close that our knees almost touched under the desk. And you? You seem to understand that. The words sent an unexpected heat through me. Understanding him wasn't the same as wanting him, I told myself. And yet, the warmth that spread through me, the pulse in my veins, said otherwise. I was already walking a line I couldn't step back from. Damien, I whispered, almost pleading. This isn't appropriate. He didn't move away. He never did. Instead, his hand brushed lightly against my arm. Not enough to claim me fully, but enough to make my skin prickle, my thoughts scatter. Appropriate, he said softly, is a word for people who don't understand power. Desire, temptation, those are rules I set. Not society. Not anyone else. My pulse hammered in my ears. I realized then that his obsession with me wasn't casual. It was calculated, all-consuming, and undeniably possessive. He wanted to control me not because he had to, but because he could. And the terrifying, exhilarating truth was that part of me wanted him to. The silence stretched between us, charged and electric, until the faint sound of the office clock reminded me of the time. I wanted to escape, to put rational distance between us, but I couldn't move. The energy in the room pinned me in place, trembling at the thought of what he might do next. Then, without warning, he leaned in, just close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. My skin tingled, nerves screaming in protest, and yet I didn't pull away. Part of me wanted to test the limits, to see how far this dangerous game would go. You want to know why I haven't let anyone get close? He whispered, his lips almost brushing my ear. Because no one understands me. No one. Until you. The words left me dizzy. I wanted to question them, to assert my boundaries, but the truth was there, undeniable. I was drawn to him in ways that scared me. Desire and fear intertwined in a way that made my heart pound and my mind reel. I stepped back, forcing space between us, trying to reclaim control of my own thoughts, my own body. But his gaze followed me, intense, unwavering, and I realized that the game had already begun, and I wasn't just a participant. I was a target, and I liked it, even as I fought the part of myself that whispered caution. Over the next week, the tension between us became a rhythm I couldn't escape. Accidental touches in the hallway, lingering glances across the boardroom, quiet moments when we were alone, charged with unspoken rules and dangerous anticipation. Every encounter left me unsteady, flushed with a mixture of fear and something darker, desire I could barely acknowledge. Office politics intensified too. I noticed subtle glances from colleagues, whispered conversations that died when Damien passed by. Competitors within the firm were clearly trying to exploit weaknesses, to undermine him, but he moved like a shadow through it all, silent, precise, controlling. And I was learning fast that I was being drawn into more than just a workplace. I was being drawn into a battlefield of power, obsession, and danger, and the line between professional and personal had already blurred beyond recognition. One evening, as I organized a pile of contracts, Damien appeared behind me. His hand brushed against mine. Again, brief, almost accidental, but the effect was immediate. My breath caught. He leaned closer, the heat of his body pressing against me, the faint scent of him overwhelming. "Vivienne," he murmured, low and intimate. "Do you know how much power you have? Over me. Over yourself." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. I'm not sure, I admitted. "You will learn," he said, and there was no question in his tone. only command, possession, session. I realized then that I was falling for him, dangerously, irrevocably. And yet, fear clawed at the edges of my mind. I was losing control, slipping deeper into a world I hadn't fully understood, and might never escape. As I left the office that night, the city lights blurred through the window, and I felt a dizzying mix of exhilaration and dread. Damien Cross wasn't just a man I worked for. He was a force consuming everything in his orbit, and I had stepped too close. The game had begun, and I wasn't just playing. I was already trapped. Chapter 5. I had thought I knew the rhythm of Damien Cross's office, the calculated chaos, the tension, the thrill of walking through fire without getting burned. I was wrong. That day, as I sifted through digital files to prepare for a board meeting, I stumbled across something I shouldn't have. Something buried deep, hidden behind layers of encryption, folders marked confidential, eyes only. My heart raced not just because of what I saw, but because of the realization. I wasn't just handling contracts and schedules. I was holding pieces of a puzzle that could unravel Damien Cross entirely. The files exposed transactions that weren't merely aggressive business maneuvers. They hinted at something far darker. Offshore accounts, shell companies, deals that skirted legality, and partnerships that reeked of danger. I froze, staring at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed for me to close the files, walk away, and pretend I had seen nothing. But another, more dangerous instinct, the one Damien seemed to ignite in me daily, urged me to dig deeper, to understand. And that's when I realized the twist I hadn't anticipated. Damien knew I would find it. The realization hit me like a punch. He hadn't stopped me, hadn't redirected my attention. He had set the stage, a test, and now I was in it. My loyalty, my intelligence, my discretion, all being measured without a word. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the storm in my chest. I had a choice. I could run, or I could play the game he had orchestrated. And even as fear clawed at me, part of me, the part that craved his approval, his obsession, his presence, wanted to see how far I could go. Before I could process more, the office door clicked open. I looked up sharply, heart skipping a beat. It wasn't Damien. It was a woman, tall, elegant, impossibly poised, with eyes that carried a mix of anger, calculation, and entitlement. Lydia Cross, Damien's estranged sister. "You found it, haven't you?" she said, her voice smooth, cold, and dangerous. I was wondering how long it would take. I swallowed, trying to steady my racing heart. I started, but she cut me off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Don't play innocent with me, Vivienne. You've seen things you weren't supposed to. Things that could destroy Damien." Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to mine. "And now, you're in the middle of it." I took a step back, aware of the fragility of my position. One wrong move, one wrong word, and I could be more than just a secretary in the crossfire. I could be a weapon, a pawn, or worse. "I don't want trouble," I said cautiously. "I'm just doing my job." Her laugh was sharp, not friendly. "Your job is exactly what makes you dangerous. You have access, you have insight, and you don't yet understand the weight of what you're holding." As she spoke, a part of me panicked. Damien's empire wasn't just numbers and contracts. It was power, influence, and danger intertwined. And now I had stumbled into the center of it all, knowing more than I was meant to. Then, almost as if summoned by the tension, Damien appeared. He didn't storm in. He didn't yell. He simply entered, silent, commanding, and immediately Lydia's posture shifted. She stiffened, the ease in her voice faltering under his gaze. "Lydia," he said, calm but edged with steel. "I see you've met Vivienne." "Yes," Lydia replied, her voice tight. "She's very curious." "Too curious, maybe. She's seen things, Damien. Things you'd rather she hadn't." His gaze shifted to me then, piercing, assessing. There was a subtle heat in his eyes, a darkness I had come to both fear and crave. "Curious," he repeated, a hint of amusement underlining the warning. "Good. I like women who pay attention, who understand the game, who survive it." I swallowed, aware that I was being both tested and protected, a dangerous duality that left me dizzy. Damien crossed the room, stopping a mere foot from me. The air between us was charged, intimate, suffocating. His presence was possession and threat in equal measure, and I felt a shiver of both fear and longing. "You found it," he said softly, almost a whisper. His lips close enough that the words grazed my ear. "And I let you." I stiffened. "You?" "Yes," he interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "I let you find it to see how you handle it. To see if you're clever enough to survive in my world. Clever enough to survive me." My pulse quickened. I realized then that everything he had done, every lingering touch, every intense gaze, every challenge, had been part of a larger design. And now I was in the thick of it. Lydia didn't move. Her eyes narrowed. "You always think you're untouchable, Damien. But one mistake, and everything falls apart." "Even her," she said, glancing at me. Damien's jaw tightened, the controlled fury in his posture making the air itself seem heavier. "Vivienne," he said, his voice commanding. "Ignore her. She doesn't understand the stakes." I felt the heat of his hand on mine, not touching fully, but enough to ground me, to claim me, to warn me and protect me simultaneously. My body reacted before my mind could, shivering, wanting, acknowledging the possessive pull he had over me. Lydia's lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over," she said before stepping back, her heels clicking against the floor as she exited. "Be careful. The world is watching." As the door shut, Damien's control seemed to settle over me like a second skin. He leaned closer, his presence suffocating, his eyes dark and magnetic. "Did that scare you?" he asked softly, though the subtle smirk in his expression told me he enjoyed the effect he had on me. "A little," I admitted, though I also felt a rush of adrenaline and something darker, desire, fear, thrill, all swirling together. "Good," he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear. "You need to understand what it feels like to be cornered, to be aware, to want to survive, to want me." I swallowed hard, aware that he was testing me, pushing me, consuming me in ways I wasn't ready to admit, but already addicted to. I felt the weight of his obsession, the darkness, the desire, the control. And I realized that I was falling deeper, irrevocably, into a world I couldn't escape. "You're playing a dangerous game," I whispered, trying to assert some semblance of control. He chuckled, low and throaty. "Danger is my world. And now, Vivienne, you are part of it. The question is, can you survive it? Can you survive me?" I didn't answer immediately. My mind raced, aware that my loyalty, my intelligence, my restraint, and my heart were all being tested. I looked at him, at the intensity in his eyes, and understood that surviving him meant surrendering to the tension, the danger, the desire. As I left the office that night, the city lights glinting through the windows, I felt the weight of secrets pressing down on me. Damien's world was darker, more thrilling, and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And the line between professional duty and obsession, trust and desire, had already begun to blur. I wasn't just a secretary anymore. I was a player in a game that demanded intelligence, courage, and cunning, and I was dangerously aware that I was already falling for the man at its center. Chapter 6. The moment I walked into the office that morning, I felt it. A tension thicker than the polished marble floors beneath my heels. Damien wasn't there yet, but the air was charged, heavy, and somehow watching. I had barely settled at my desk when the first message came through my phone. No sender ID. Just words that made my blood run cold. "You think you're safe with him? Think again." I froze, my fingers tightening around the edge of my chair. Ethan Kane. His name alone carried weight, the kind that haunted memories, sleepless nights, and reckless decisions I had thought I'd left behind. And yet, here he was, not in person, but in every subtle threat his words carried. Before I could gather my thoughts, my friend Samantha appeared, her expression bright and cheerful. Or at least that's what I thought at first. "Hey Viv, you look stressed. Coffee?" she asked, leaning against my desk casually. I hesitated, scanning the room. Something about the timing felt off. Maybe later," I said cautiously. My instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. And then, as if confirming my fears, a notification from my email pinged. A report I hadn't sent, with alterations I hadn't made. The sender. Samantha. Cold realization slid through me. Samantha wasn't just being helpful. She was playing a part. The puzzle pieces fell into place. Ethan's interference, her sudden eagerness to check in, the subtle probing questions she had been asking about Damien. My chest tightened with a mixture of fear, betrayal, and anger. By the time Damien arrived, I had pieced together enough to know the truth. Ethan was escalating, testing me, trying to manipulate me against Damien. And Samantha, she had been helping him. Damien's entrance was like a storm breaking in a quiet city. His presence consumed the room. He didn't smile. He didn't ask questions at first. He simply stopped in front of me, eyes sharp, piercing, as if he could read every thought I hadn't spoken. "You've seen the signs," he said quietly, the low timbre of his voice sending a shiver straight through me. "You know what's happening." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, I think Samantha's involved. And Ethan, he's escalating." Damien's eyes darkened, a dangerous, possessive shadow passing over them. He reached for my hand, brushing it lightly. Intentional or accidental, I couldn't tell, and the warmth of his touch ignited the familiar heat in my chest. "Good," he murmured. "I like it when you notice. When you pay attention. When you survive." The words were part praise, part warning, and part unspoken claim over me. My pulse spiked. He wasn't just protecting me. He was asserting control, testing boundaries, and making me aware that he was as obsessed with me as I was beginning to realize I was with him. Throughout the morning, the tension escalated. Samantha moved through the office with a practiced ease, her friendly smile masking calculations I had only begun to uncover. Ethan's influence was subtle but deliberate. Emails, anonymous calls, minor disruptions, all designed to throw me off balance and measure my response. And Damien watched. Always watching. He hovered near my desk, leaning slightly. His presence oppressive and intoxicating at the same time. Every accidental touch, every lingering gaze, every word was a calculated test of my loyalty and my restraint. By mid-afternoon, I had decided I wasn't just going to be a pawn. I would assert myself, play the game, and survive on my terms. I approached Samantha cautiously, keeping my voice neutral, professional. "You've been helping Ethan," I said softly, letting the accusation hang in the air. Her smile faltered for the briefest second before she masked it. "Viv, I'm just looking out for you. You know that." I stared at her, letting the words hang between us like a knife. "Don't lie to me. I know what's happening. And if you think you can manipulate me, you're wrong." The subtle tension in the air was palpable. She smiled tightly, a mixture of amusement and annoyance, and left without another word. But I knew the game had changed. I had announced that I wasn't defenseless, that I wasn't a pawn. And that shift in power thrilled and terrified me. Damien appeared beside me then, as if summoned. His hand brushed mine briefly. A subtle mark, a claim, a reminder. "Good," he whispered, his voice low and intimate. "You're learning fast. That's why I've been testing you. That's why I let Ethan push boundaries. You need to know you can survive him. You need to know you can survive me." My breath caught. Every encounter with him was a lesson wrapped in desire and danger, and I realized that the line between fear, control, and desire was dissolving. I was addicted to the tension, to the electricity that sparked every time he drew near. By the evening, Ethan made his move in person. I was leaving my desk when the elevator doors opened to reveal him, smirking like he always did. His eyes sharp and calculating. "Hello, Vivienne," he said smoothly. "Miss me?" I stiffened, aware that Damien was moments behind me. I could feel the storm building, the push and pull of desire, control, fear, and the thrill of danger. "You've been meddling," Damien said from behind me, voice low, dangerous, possessive. "Step back." Ethan chuckled softly, but there was a dangerous edge in his amusement. "I'm just reminding her of her options," he said, glancing at me with a teasing intensity. "Not that she seems confused yet." I felt Damien's hand on the small of my back, grounding me, marking me, asserting control. The heat of his body against mine sent shivers down my spine. He was not just my protector. He was my tormentor, the embodiment of obsession and dominance, and I was utterly powerless to resist. "Leave," Damien said, voice sharp as steel, and Ethan finally backed down, his smirk lingering, promising he wasn't done. After he left, Damien's gaze burned into mine. "You saw how he operates. How subtle, how dangerous. You need to be careful. And you need to trust me." "I do trust you," I whispered, though the words felt insufficient. "But it's overwhelming." He leaned closer, close enough that I could feel his breath on my ear, low and intimate. "Good. Should be. That's how you know you're alive. That's how you know you're playing the game right. You're learning, Vivienne. You're surviving. And soon you'll understand that surviving me is the most dangerous, thrilling test of all." I swallowed, aware that I was falling deeper into a world I couldn't escape. The desire, the fear, the power, the obsession, it all swirled together, intoxicating, overwhelming, impossible to resist. I realized that I wasn't just navigating office politics or threats from the past anymore. I was entangled in a web of obsession, desire, and danger that could consume me entirely. And I didn't want to escape. Because Damien Cross didn't just want me safe. He wanted me close, claimed, tested. And I was already addicted to every dangerous, intoxicating moment. Chapter 7. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows over polished mahogany, but the real chill came from the tension that crackled like static in the air. Damien Cross's empire was under threat, and I could feel it in every whispered conversation, every furtive glance between executives who usually bowed silently to his will. I had barely taken my seat when the first subtle attacks began. Contracts altered, numbers misrepresented, minor leaks that could snowball into catastrophic consequences. The chaos wasn't accidental. Someone wanted to see Damien falter, to see him vulnerable. And now I was in the center of it, my own judgment tested in ways that made my pulse hammer and my stomach twist. Samantha was present, as always, her demeanor casual, professional, but something about her movements felt off. Too deliberate, too calculated. My gut screamed betrayal, and I began watching her carefully, noting every glance she cast at emails, every tiny hesitation when Damien spoke. My mind raced back to the evidence I had uncovered about Ethan Kane. He wasn't just interfering from the shadows. He had allies, and I was beginning to see the pattern. I excused myself under the pretense of reviewing documents in a quieter office and began to dig. Carefully, methodically. The deeper I went, the more damning the connections became. Samantha wasn't just being careless. She was feeding Ethan information, guiding him through the chaos she helped create, ensuring he stayed one step ahead. Every instinct I had about her was confirmed, and my chest tightened with a mix of anger and betrayal. I returned to the boardroom with a heavy heart but a sharp mind. Damien's eyes met mine across the table, gray and intense, holding mine with an almost painful clarity. He didn't speak, but I knew he had already sensed the truth. That look, possessive, obsessive, protective, was his silent command. Do not fail me. Minutes later, Samantha made the mistake of letting her guard drop. A message pinged from her computer, visible from across the table. Damien's gaze shifted to it in an instant, his lips curving in a subtle, dangerous smile. He didn't call her out immediately. Instead, he watched, silent, his presence a shadow over her every move. I realized then that he was letting me see the betrayal unfold, testing how I would respond, measuring my loyalty and cunning. When the meeting adjourned, Damien caught up with me in the hallway. His hand brushed mine lightly as he passed, deliberate enough to send a shock through me, a reminder of his control, his claim. "Did you see it?" he asked softly, his voice low, almost intimate. "I did," I murmured, my pulse still racing. "Samantha, she's working with Ethan." His eyes darkened, a flicker of rage and possessiveness crossing his features. "Good. You know what to do." The words were brief, clipped, but charged with a threat I could feel all the way to my bones. Later that evening, when the office had cleared, Damien called me into his private study. The door closed behind me, sealing us in a space thick with tension, heat, and unspoken rules. His presence was suffocating, magnetic, intoxicating. I could feel the rhythm of my own heartbeat in response to him, every nerve ending alive and alert. "You handled yourself well today," he said, stepping close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His hand brushed mine, lingering just enough to ignite a shiver. "Clever, perceptive, loyal. The way I like my people." I swallowed, trying to maintain composure, though the heat rising in my chest betrayed me. I'm learning," I admitted softly. "You've learned more than you realize," he murmured, leaning closer, the heat of his body pressing against mine. "And you're proving that you're not just a pawn. You're dangerous. In the best way." My breath caught. Dangerous. Desire and fear collided in my chest, and I realized that every day, every test, every subtle touch, was pushing me toward something I hadn't allowed myself to feel fully, falling for him completely, irrevocably. And then he kissed me. The world contracted to the press of his lips against mine, the burn of heat, a need-consuming reason, thought, and caution. It was demanding, possessive, intoxicating. I felt him claim me, test me, and I responded in kind, letting the tension explode into raw, unrestrained passion. Every worry, every fear, every betrayal and intrigue from the office world outside vanished, leaving only the two of us locked in this dangerous, erotic gravity. When we finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Damien rested his forehead against mine, his eyes dark with a possessive fire. "You don't understand yet," he whispered, voice low, husky. "This world, it's dangerous. Every step, every alliance, every touch. It can be life or death. And I will protect you. But only if you trust me completely." I nodded, aware of the truth in his words. I trusted him completely, dangerously. Just as I began to gather myself, a new layer of complication arrived. Lydia Cross. She appeared unexpectedly, elegant and sharp, her eyes scanning me like a puzzle she intended to solve. "Vivienne," she said, her tone deceptively calm, "I've been thinking. You may not realize it yet, but you're connected to this family, more than you know." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" I asked, wary, uncertain. "You'll find out soon enough," she said cryptically. "It changes everything. Loyalty, love. Even your survival." Damien's hand immediately found mine, gripping it with a possessive intensity that sent a jolt through me. "Don't listen to her," he growled softly, eyes flashing with protective fury. "Whatever she's planning, she's dangerous. And right now, all that matters is us. You, me, and surviving." I realized then that the world I had stepped into wasn't just corporate politics or office rivalry. It was a labyrinth of betrayal, obsession, desire, and secrets, where love and danger were inseparable, and where every choice could have consequences I wasn't prepared for. As the night drew in and the office emptied, Damien and I lingered in the study, the electric tension between us unrelenting. His hands traced the lines of my body with a possessive precision that made my pulse race, and I found myself yielding to the pull, to the danger, to the thrilling fire that had become our shared reality. And as I left later that evening, my mind spinning with revelations, betrayal, and erotic memory, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. In Damien Cross's world, there were no safe choices, no simple loyalties, and no escapes from desire. I was already too far gone. Chapter 8. The moment the van door slammed behind me, the reality hit me like a punch to the chest. Darkness, silence, the faint hum of the engine vibrating under me. My heart pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat I could barely control. Ethan Kane. He had finally made his move, and I was trapped in the middle of it. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to think clearly, but fear surged, clawing at my chest. The leather seat pressed against me, the shadows in the vehicle stretching and twisting as if alive. I had expected threats, I had expected manipulations, but this was different. Dangerous. Immediate. Personal. "You shouldn't have left the office alone," Ethan's voice said from the darkness, low, mocking, and terrifyingly intimate. "I warned you, Vivienne. You think you can play games with Damien and survive? Think again." I swallowed, forcing myself to meet his gaze despite the panic rising in me. "You don't frighten me," I said, though my voice trembled despite my effort. "And I'm not a pawn." His laugh was cruel, sharp, echoing in the tight space. "Not a pawn. Sweetheart, that's exactly what you are. But you're clever. I'll give you that. And cleverness deserves a challenge." I knew I had to act. Panic would get me nowhere, and Ethan thrived on my fear. I forced my mind to focus, to assess every detail. The lock on the door, the hum of the engine, the subtle shifts in his posture. He wasn't paying full attention. He thought he had complete control, and that overconfidence could be his undoing. I shifted slightly, letting my movements appear tentative, even scared. "Ethan, you really think Damien will just stand by?" I asked softly, letting the words drip with concern and curiosity. "He'll come for me. You know that." A flicker of something, anger, amusement, desire, crossed his face. "That's the idea," he said, leaning closer, so close I could feel the heat of him without touching. "Let's see if your little billionaire is as obsessed as you say." My pulse spiked at the words, a strange, dangerous heat rising in me. Yes, Damien was obsessed. Yes, he would come for me, and yes, I wanted him to. But first I had to survive this encounter. Ethan underestimated me. He always had, in subtle ways, in careless assumptions, and that was my advantage. I let my fear show, allowed my vulnerability to appear, but underneath it I was calculating, planning. Every word, every movement was a test, a measurement. "You're clever," Ethan said suddenly, almost as if reading my thoughts. "I see it in your eyes. Always calculating. Always resisting." I let a small smirk play at the corner of my lips, invisible in the dark. "It's how I survive," I murmured. He hesitated, and I seized the opportunity. Slowly, deliberately, I shifted my weight, feeling for the door handle with one hand while letting the other rest lightly on my lap. My movements were subtle, precise, and meant to distract him. "You know," he said softly, leaning closer, his breath warm against my neck, "you have no idea how tempting you are when you resist. It makes me want to break you. To prove whose control matters." The words made my blood surge, not just with fear, but with a dangerous, illicit thrill. Damien had taught me in small ways the power of desire, of controlled risk, of tension that teetered on the edge between obsession and surrender. I let that memory guide me, let it fuel my courage. The van slowed, and I felt the subtle shift of momentum, the perfect angle. In one fluid motion, I twisted, using my legs to leverage Ethan's position, pushing him off balance. He stumbled, and I seized the door handle, yanking it open just enough to wedge a foot outside. The van lurched, and he recovered, but I had created a window. Every second counted. My mind raced, adrenaline sharpening my senses, every nerve on fire. "You're clever," he growled, regaining his stance, his hands moving toward me. But I was faster, instinctively moving to stay out of reach, my heart hammering with the thrill of danger and defiance. Then in the chaos I heard it, a sound that made my blood turn to fire in my veins. The deep, controlled growl of Damien's voice. "Vivienne." Relief and desire collided, wild and overwhelming. He was here. He always came. Always. I felt the van jerk as if brakes had been slammed, the engine growling under his arrival, the unmistakable presence of control and obsession surrounding me like a shield. Ethan's expression flickered, fear for the first time crossing his face. How?" he stammered. Damien didn't answer. He moved with a predator's grace, entering the van with a quiet, terrifying power. Every movement, every line of his body radiated danger and possession. He approached me, eyes locked on mine, a dark, magnetic storm that made my knees weak and my pulse race. "You're safe now," he murmured, though the words carried more weight than reassurance. They were a command, a claim. "And no one touches what's mine." I shivered, not from fear, but from the intensity, the erotic charge, the impossible tension between danger and desire. Damien's hands found mine, gripping lightly, possessively, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the heat of his body, the dark promise in his gaze, and the knowledge that he would protect me at all costs. Ethan backed away, sensing the shift in power. The van felt smaller, the stakes higher, the danger palpable. And yet, in that moment, I realized I had not just survived. I had outsmarted him, navigated the chaos, and proved my own intelligence and courage. Damien's lips brushed against my ear, low, intimate, possessive. "Clever girl," he whispered. "You survived him. And now you've survived me." The words sent a thrill through me, equal parts fear, desire, and exhilaration. I leaned into him instinctively, feeling the raw heat and obsession between us, knowing that the world outside, the threats, the betrayals, the danger, didn't matter in that moment. Because in Damien's arms, I was claimed, protected, and dangerously alive. As the van rolled to a halt under Damien's command, I realized the truth that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. Desire and danger were inseparable in his world. To survive was to yield, to surrender, and to play the game that he defined. And for the first time I embraced it fully. I wasn't just a victim. I was a player, a survivor, and dangerously, irrevocably drawn into Damien Cross's dark, obsessive, intoxicating world. Chapter 9. The penthouse smelled of expensive cologne and tension, a heady mix that made my pulse race before I even saw him. Damien was already there, leaning against the marble countertop, his eyes dark, stormy, and magnetic. The city sprawled behind him in a glittering, indifferent canvas, but inside this apartment, everything boiled down to us, and the danger we could no longer ignore. The first clue of betrayal hit me like ice water. Samantha appeared from the shadows, her smile perfectly poised, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "I see you two are comfortable," she said, voice sweet but venomous. "But I suppose you've earned some truth." My chest tightened. The truth. I had already pieced it together, the leaks, the manipulations, the emails. But hearing it spoken aloud, in this room where control was Damien's and yet I had carved my own space, made my stomach twist. "She's been working with Ethan," I whispered, turning to Damien. My voice carried fear, anger, and an unshakable defiance. Damien's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. I felt the almost tangible weight of his possessiveness. "I know," he said quietly, but there was fire in his gaze, a storm barely restrained. "I've known. And now she will pay for it." I stepped closer to him instinctively, drawn by the intensity, by the dark, magnetic pull he exerted over every part of me. He noticed, of course, and a faint smirk curved his lips. "You're not just mine," he murmured, "but you understand me, the obsession, the danger. That's why you're here with me now." Samantha laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think you control everything, Damien. But even you have limits." Her words, dripping with arrogance, sparked a dangerous fire between them, and I realized that the showdown wasn't just about loyalty. It was about power, about control, about dominance. Ethan's presence, though absent physically, was felt in every threat he had planted, every manipulation he had orchestrated. And I knew, deep down, that the danger wasn't over. But here in this room I had a choice. Fight, survive, and claim my place beside Damien, or falter. Damien moved toward Samantha, slow, deliberate, predatory. The heat of his body radiated control, obsession, and desire all at once. I felt it in my bones, in the flush rising through my chest. He wasn't just confronting her. He was asserting his claim, and I realized that the erotic charge between us wasn't a distraction. It was a weapon. "You've betrayed her," I said, pointing at Samantha, voice trembling with a mix of anger and arousal. "And me? Why?" Samantha's smile faltered for the briefest moment before she masked it. "Because some truths are worth exploiting. Because he's vulnerable when he's distracted." Her gaze flicked toward Damien, and I realized the depth of her arrogance. She thought she could play this game against him. Against both of us. But she underestimated me. I was no longer just a secretary, a pawn, or a helpless witness. I had survived Ethan. I had navigated danger, deception, and desire. And now I was ready to act. I stepped closer to Samantha, letting my body language radiate control and confidence. Damien's gaze met mine, sharp, intense, approving. His hand brushed my back lightly, possessive and claiming, and I felt the fire within me ignite. "You lose," I said softly, letting the words carry both authority and seduction. "And you've underestimated the wrong woman." Samantha's smirk faltered, but before she could respond, Damien closed the distance, his hand gripping her arm. The tension between power and resistance, danger and desire, electrified the room. I watched, heart hammering, as he asserted dominance, as he controlled the chaos with a terrifying grace. And then he turned to me, eyes dark and smoldering. "Come here," he commanded softly, and I obeyed, drawn by the gravity of him, the heat, the obsession that radiated from every line of his body. Our connection snapped taut like a wire. 1 second we were strategists in a dangerous game. The next we were something darker, more intimate. Desire and danger merged, and I felt the pulse of passion, control, and trust blur in a way that left me dizzy and shivering. His lips found mine, possessive, demanding, igniting a fire I hadn't realized was burning this fiercely. I melted against him, letting the tension spill into raw, sensual need. Every kiss, every touch, every heated glance became a declaration. This was ours, our world, and no enemy could sever it. Not Samantha, not Ethan, not even the stakes of life and death outside these walls. Even as we succumbed to the erotic tension, the danger never left. Damien's senses were razor-sharp, and I realized that our desire was as much a weapon as his rage. Every brush of skin, every gasp, every whisper of our bodies intertwined in the heat of confrontation, and I knew we were both aware. This was survival. And in this survival we claimed one another fully. When the moment of passion broke, breathless and trembling, Damien pulled me close, forehead against mine. "You're mine," he whispered, voice low, dark, full of obsession and possessiveness. "And I'll protect you from every threat, real or imagined. I shivered, knowing the truth behind his words. I was his not just in body but in mind, heart and will. And I wanted him as fiercely as he wanted me. But even as I reveled in the dangerous intimacy, Samantha's departure and Ethan's lingering shadow reminded me. The threat wasn't over. Ethan wasn't fully defeated. Somewhere out there he plotted, schemed, waited for the chance to strike again. And the revelation Lydia had planted in the back of my mind, my possible connection to Damien's family past, twisted the knife of uncertainty and desire. I looked at Damien, seeing the obsession, the protection, the dark promise in his eyes. "We're not done," I whispered, voice low, aware of both desire and danger. "No," he agreed, his lips brushing mine briefly, possessive and claiming. "Not by a long shot. But together, we're unstoppable." In that penthouse, amid fire, lust, betrayal and vengeance, I realized the truth. In Damien Cross's world, desire and danger were inseparable. Passion was as deadly as it was intoxicating, loyalty as fragile as obsession, and love as consuming as revenge. And I was already too far gone to turn back. Chapter 10. The city was silent beneath Damien's penthouse that night, but inside, chaos simmered like a storm ready to break. Ethan Kane's shadow still lingered, a dangerous promise of revenge, and Samantha's betrayal had left scars I could feel deep in my chest. Every instinct screamed that this would be the night of reckoning. Life and death, love and obsession, all colliding in one final, terrifying moment. Damien stood beside me, his presence a physical force that made my pulse race and my breath catch. He didn't speak at first, simply letting the silence hang, thick with tension, until I finally met his gaze. Those stormy gray eyes of his held everything: rage, obsession, desire, and protectiveness. I realized then that I had never truly known the depth of his darkness until now. And yet I craved it, every part of it. "They're coming," he said softly, his hand gripping mine with possessive strength. "Tonight it ends. Either we survive this together, or it destroys everything." I nodded, heart pounding. I was terrified. I was exhilarated. And I was completely, irreversibly his. The first sign of intrusion came almost silently, shadows shifting outside the balcony door. Ethan. He had come, just as predicted, and I could feel Damien's body tense, ready to strike. But the difference now was that I wasn't just a bystander. I had learned, I had fought, and I had survived. "You think you can control her?" Ethan's voice sneered from the dark, dripping with malice. "She's always been mine. She doesn't belong to you, Cross." Damien's laugh was low, dangerous, a sound that made my stomach twist with heat and fear. "She belongs to no one but herself. And she belongs with me." Ethan moved suddenly, lunging toward the balcony door, but I was faster. Years of navigating danger, manipulation, and desire had sharpened me, and I intercepted him, using every ounce of cunning and strength I had learned from surviving his schemes before. I grabbed a small statuette from the side table, hurling it with precision. It struck him squarely in the chest, making him stagger back. Damien moved like a predator, closing the distance between us and Ethan with terrifying speed. His hands were lethal, controlled, and yet there was a rhythm to his fury, a dark obsession that made my pulse race with both fear and desire. Every punch, every movement, every calculated strike carried the erotic charge that had been building between us for months. I watched, captivated and horrified, as Damien became the storm incarnate, possessive, dangerous, and completely consumed by the need to protect me. I realized then that this was not just about survival. This was about power, obsession, and control, the very essence of Damien Cross. And I had become part of it, willing and eager, knowing the stakes but unable to resist the dark pull. Ethan faltered, a rare moment of vulnerability, and Damien seized it. He pressed him to the ground, eyes blazing, and I felt a shiver of triumph and erotic thrill at witnessing the man I desired so completely in his full obsessive force. "You will never touch her again," Damien growled, voice low, vibrating with rage. "Do you understand me?" Ethan's laugh was weak, defiant, but it lacked conviction. Damien leaned closer, the power dynamic absolute, the threat and desire indistinguishable. "I said never." With Ethan incapacitated, Damien's attention shifted to me. He lifted my chin gently, forcing my gaze to meet his. The storm in his eyes softened, just enough for me to see the depth of his obsession. His need, his love, twisted, dark, and consuming. "You're alive," he whispered, almost a prayer, almost a command. "And that's all that matters." I pressed against him instinctively, letting the tension of fear, desire, and survival melt into a raw, intoxicating heat. His hands roamed possessively, claiming, testing, marking, and I responded in kind, surrendering to the erotic gravity between us. Every kiss, every whisper, every brush of skin against skin became a declaration, not just of lust, but of survival, obsession, and undeniable connection. Even as the danger passed, for now, I knew the world outside this room still held threats. Ethan was not fully gone. His shadow lingered, a reminder that darkness never completely vanished. But in Damien's arms, in the sanctuary of our obsession, I felt invincible, unbroken, and utterly consumed. Later, as we lay entwined on the penthouse couch, bodies slick with sweat, hearts racing from fear and desire alike, Damien's lips brushed my ear. "No one will ever threaten you again," he murmured, possessive, dark, and intoxicating. "I will protect you. I will claim you. And if anyone dares, they will regret it." I shivered, overwhelmed by the heat of his body, the intensity of his obsession, and the intoxicating danger that had defined our relationship from the very first day I stepped into his office. "I trust you," I whispered, though the words barely captured the storm of emotions inside me. "Completely." He smiled, a dark, dangerous, and erotic curve of his lips. "Good," he said softly, yet every syllable carried dominance and desire. "Because once you belong to me, Vivienne, there's no turning back." I pressed against him, letting the sensation of possession, love, and obsession flood through me. In Damien's world, desire and danger were inseparable. Love was intertwined with obsession. Lust was a weapon as much as it was salvation. And I realized with terrifying clarity that I didn't want to escape. I wanted it all: the danger, the desire, the obsession, and Damien. We were survivors, warriors in a world that demanded cunning, control, and fire. And together we were unstoppable. Ethan Kane might still linger, a shadow in the periphery, a threat that could return, but in this moment Damien and I were absolute. Dark, consumed, obsessed, life. And as his lips claimed mine once more, I knew the truth I had been running toward all along. There was no escaping Damien Cross, no surviving him, no turning back. I was his irrevocably, dangerously, and completely. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The city outside glittered and hummed, oblivious to the darkness, lust, and obsession that had consumed us. But inside the penthouse, everything had been claimed, settled, and resolved. Now. And I didn't need more.